we bring two of history's most influential minds face to face, Krishna and Gautama, the Buddha. Their debate starts with this question. A warrior raises his bow for a war he knows is just. Then he sees who's waiting on the other side, his teachers, his cousins, the uncles who raised him. He can't fight them. But if he walks away, his people fall to tyranny. Frozen between the two, he asks, "What do I do?"
I know this man. I have knelt beside him before. His name was Arjuna, and I was holding the reins of his chariot when his bow slipped from his fingers and he sank down between the horses. Exactly like this. So let me tell you what I told him. An hour earlier, he was a soldier, fed, armored, certain. Then he looked across the field, saw the familiar faces, and suddenly discovered philosophy. And I asked him the only honest question there was. Where was all this tenderness yesterday when the enemy was strangers? The cause has not changed. Only the cost has turned personal. A man does not get to abandon the people he swore to protect the moment the price lands on a face he recognizes. The trembling feels sacred. It is not. It is only the first time the killing stopped being convenient.
And Arjuna picked the bow back up. Of course he did. You left him no honorable way to set it down. Hear what you actually did, Krishna. A man stood there shaking, and instead of asking what the shaking knew, you shamed it out of him. You asked where his tenderness was yesterday when the enemy was strangers. A fair question. But you drew the wrong lesson from it. You told him, the strangers were always killable, so the cousins must be too. I tell him the reverse. The cousins were never killable, and he is only now, at last, beginning to see it. That tremor is not cowardice climbing his arm. It is his own buried compassion finally waking. His sin was never the trembling today. It was the ease yesterday, when he could fell a stranger without a thought, never having troubled to learn that the stranger too had teachers, had cousins, had uncles who raised him. Every man on that far ridge is somebody's familiar face, Krishna. Your warrior simply stood too far away to weep. You did not answer his question. You out-argued it. And the distance between those two things is a field full of the dead.
His compassion waking, is that what you call it? I call it attachment, wearing compassion's robe. Listen to the words he used. My teachers, my cousins, the uncles who raised me. My. He does not grieve for these men. He grieves for himself, about to lose them. And you would know that ache better than anyone, Gautama. You simply chose the other way out of it. One night, in your own palace, you stood over your sleeping wife and your newborn son, and you decided that the cleanest way never to be torn the way this warrior is torn was to walk out the door before they woke. You even gave that newborn boy the name Rahula, the fetter, the chain, as if you had already sentenced him to be a weight you would one day slip, rather than a son you would carry. And slip him you did, in the dark. You did not conquer attachment that night, you tiptoed past it. At least this man is still standing in front of the people he loves, willing to be torn apart by them. You loved yours best from a distance.
Yes, I left them sleeping. But you have the shape of it wrong. I did not leave because I loved them too little. I left because I loved them and saw that my love had become a cage. I wanted them to stay mine, to stay fixed, to never change, and that wanting was already a quiet violence against them. So I went to find a love that does not need to own. And I came back, Krishna. My son became my disciple. My wife, in time, walked the path herself. I did not abandon them to a distance. I returned to them as a man who could finally love them without clutching. You measure love by who stays in the room. I learned it is measured by whether you can open your hand.
But the war was already in motion, long before the warrior ever doubted. If he lays down the bow, the killing simply happens without him. Krishna, are clean hands really worth that much?
They are not worth a single undefended child. Hear me. He could drop the bow, but he could not drop the war. The armies had already marched. The conches had already been blown. If he turned and walked, the arrows would still fly, only loosed by lesser men, for worse reasons, with no one left on that field who grieved before he struck. He could not choose whether the killing happened. He could choose only whether the one doing it still felt its weight. When the blood will be spilled with you or without you, are clean hands truly the highest thing a man can reach for?
You ask as though I had never held that bow. I was born to it, Krishna, a prince of the Shakyas, raised for the throne and the sword, a warrior's son in a warrior's house. The war was standing in my field too, and I walked away from it, not because I was too soft to fight, but because I had stood close enough to see what the fighting was for. You tell him the killing will happen anyway. Perhaps. But it will happen anyway is the oldest rope ever handed to a good man so that he might hang himself with it. Every executioner who ever lived was told the axe would only fall in some crueler hand if not his own. The question was never whether the world is violent. It is whether you agree to become the instrument it reaches for.
Krishna, you told that warrior to trust a divine will. Buddha, you say there is no one to trust. So when life truly breaks a man, what should he do?
2 straws are caught in a flood. The first lies crossways against the current, fighting it, screaming that it will hold the whole river back, and it is battered and half-drowned every inch of the way. The second lies along the flow and is carried, turning gently, almost dancing. Both reach the sea. Both. Only one suffers the entire journey there. To surrender is not to stop moving. It is to stop the mad pretense that you were ever the one holding the river back.
But hear what that beautiful straw teaches. Once it leaves your mouth and reaches the ear of a hungry, frightened man, it teaches, do not struggle. The river knows best. Lie still. And who lies still, Krishna? Not kings, the poor. For 1,000 years, the people who believed you have knelt, told their hunger was holy, their chains divine, their suffering a gift from a loving hand. They surrendered and called the drowning devotion. That is the part that breaks my heart. So I tell them the opposite. Be a lamp unto yourself. No one is coming to carry you. And strangely, the day a crushed man truly hears that is the first day he stands up.
No one is coming. You say it to make him strong, but hear how alone you have left him. That lamp you tell him to become, its flame feeds on oil he did not press, on a wick he did not spin, with a fire no man ever first kindled. You did not make yourself, Gautama. You did not earn the breath you woke with this morning. Some current carried you all the way to the bank of the river where you finally learned to swim, and then you stood up in the shallows and announced that you had crossed alone. That is not strength. That is a man cursing the boat the moment his feet touch the shore. To trust the divine is not to sit and wait for rescue. It is only to stop lying about the obvious, that you are held, this very breath, by 10,000 hands you will never see and could never repay.
I do not deny the current carried me. I deny that I owe the rest of my life to thanking it on my knees. Yes, something brought me to the river. And then I did the one thing no current could ever do for me. I let go of the one who was being carried. You keep insisting there must be a hand holding you up, Krishna, because you cannot bear the thought of falling. I let myself fall, all the way through the floor of myself. And there was no crash, and there was no hand. There was only what is, exactly as it is. And it was enough. You are still gripping the divine because you have never once dared to open your fist. A freedom that depends on a rescuer is only a longer leash, Krishna. And you have spent your whole life mistaking the length of it for open sky.
A longer leash. Then explain this to me, Gautama. Walk into any hall, anywhere, where your own teaching is loved, and listen to what they chant before they begin. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the teaching. I take refuge in the order. Refuge, the very word you spent a lifetime trying to pry out of their hands. You told them to need no rescuer, and they made a refuge of the man who told them so. You forbade them to bow before any god, and they cast you in gold and bowed. I do not say this to wound you. I say it because it reveals the one thing you will never admit. The human heart does not merely want a refuge. It is one long reaching for one. You may refuse to name what they reach toward. You will never stop the reaching.
You have caught something true, and I will not wriggle free of it. Yes, they take refuge in me, and every time I told them what the refuge was for. A raft is a blessing while you are crossing the river, but the man who reaches the far bank then lifts the raft onto his shoulders and carries it overland for the rest of his days because it once saved him. He has mistaken the rescue for the destination. I let them take hold of me the way a drowning man takes hold of a raft, to be used, and then, with gratitude, set down. You would have them carry the raft forever and call the weight devotion. The quarrel between us was never whether men reach for a refuge. It is whether you ever let them arrive.
Then here is the divide laid bare. Krishna, you say pour yourself into life completely. Buddha, you say step back from it. Which one frees a man?
Pour in completely. Do you know why the milkmaids dropped their water pots and ran the moment they heard my flute across the fields? It was not sorcery, whatever the priests tell you. It was that, for one moment, someone was utterly there. Not half-living, not standing outside his own life, watching himself live it, but drowned, gone, dissolved into the music. That is the whole of what I teach. Not to flee the dance, to vanish into it so completely that the dancer disappears and only the dancing is left. But you, my solemn friend, you sat down beneath a tree and decided that the safest way never to be wounded by life was to want nothing from it at all. And it worked. You wanted nothing, so nothing could reach you. But tell me honestly, what is the difference between your perfect peace and simply never having been born?
You and your beautiful stories. The flute, the straws, the milkmaids running through the fields. You could make a man fall in love with his own funeral. But follow the milkmaids home, Krishna. The flute stops. The night ends. They grow old, and the ones who loved you spend their last years watching everything you gave them slip through their fingers. Because everything you pour yourself into is already leaving. The world is on fire. Quietly, constantly, the slow fire of passing, burning every single thing you tell them to embrace. You stand in the middle of it, teaching people to dance nearer the flames, and you call it love. I am only trying to wake them before they burn.
And there, that one small turn is where you lost everything. And it was so small you never felt it happen. You saw that the flower dies, and you concluded, then do not love the flower. I saw the very same flower, the very same dying, and I concluded, then love it now while it is here with all that you have. A blossom you could keep forever in a closed hand would not be worth bending down for. It is precisely because it is leaving that it deserves the whole of you. You looked into the fire of impermanence and ran from the heat. I looked into the same fire and finally understood why anything was ever worth holding at all. You think you are the brave one for staring death down, but any frightened man can refuse to love what he knows he must lose.
You misunderstand me, and I think you choose to, because the misunderstanding is prettier than the truth. I never said, do not love the flower. I said, hold it in an open palm, not a closed fist. Love it completely, and when the wind lifts it away, let your hand stay open for whatever comes next. You call that cold. I call it the only love that does not rot into grief the instant the flower is gone. Your way fills a man to the brim, then watches him shatter when it drains. Mine lets him hold the whole world and stay whole himself. The question between us was never whether to love. It is whether love must break you to prove that it was real.
You see the same world and call it two different things, a dance and a fire. Krishna, you call all of it a kind of play. How can a battlefield be play?
Because that is exactly what it is, a play, a leela. Watch a troupe perform the old story. One man comes on as the noble king, grieving. Another comes on as the demon, roaring and terrible. They fight with everything they have. The crowd weeps. And the moment the curtain falls, the two of them sit down together behind it and laugh about the whole performance. On the stage, the war was total. Behind the curtain, they were never enemies at all. That is what I am trying to show this warrior. Play your part with your whole heart. Grieve, fight, love, lose. But never forget that you are also the one behind the curtain, who knew all along that it was a stage. That is why I can laugh, Gautama, and you cannot. You mistook the costume for the corpse.
I can laugh too, Krishna, but I will not laugh at a man whose wound is real by telling him it is only paint. Stand on your stage and call the battle a play, but the cousin lying in the dust does not get up when the curtain falls. The child does not get up. The mother is not handed her son back behind the scenes. It is all a play is the most comfortable thing a comfortable man ever said. And it is always said from the wings, never from under the wheel. I do not call it theater. I call it what it is. Real suffering in real bodies that does not end because you decided it was a performance. And only when you stop pretending it is a game can you truly begin to lift it.
You think I lift nothing because I call it a play. You have it backwards. It is precisely because I know it is a play that I can run toward the burning house with steady hands, while you sit at the edge, calculating whether the fire is real enough to act on. The mother whose child is gone does not need me to agree that her wound is real. She knows it is real. What she needs is a man whose heart is not so frozen with truth that he can still bend down and lift the child. I weep at the play, Gautama. I weep real tears. And then I stand, because the next scene has already begun, and someone must be in it. You honor the suffering by staring at it. I honor it by being willing to act inside it.
Then we are closer than you will admit, because I never ask you to freeze. I ask you to see before you move. A man who charges into the burning house without seeing clearly saves no one. He only adds his own body to the fire and calls it courage. You say my heart is frozen with truth. No, Krishna. It is steadied by it. Here is the real difference between us. You act and weep and act again, and the wheel keeps turning through you without end. I move only when the seeing is clear. And in that clarity, sometimes the truest act is to refuse to add one more turn to the wheel. You will never stop moving. I have learned there is a kind of stillness that changes more than all your motion.
Krishna, your most famous counsel to that warrior was this: act, but surrender the fruit of the action. Buddha, is that the freedom it sounds like?
It is the only freedom that works inside a life instead of outside it. You have a right to the action alone, never to its fruits. Plant the field with the whole of your strength, and do not lie awake at night owning the harvest. Fight the just war, and neither feast on the victory nor drown in the defeat. Most men are not torn apart by their work. They are torn apart by their grasping at what the work might bring them. Cut that one cord, and you may pour your entire self into the deed and still walk away from it weightless. That is freedom in the middle of the world, not somewhere outside it.
And there, hear how near we stand. We almost speak with a single voice. Cut the cord of grasping. I have said nothing else for 45 years. But you have folded one small word into your beautiful sentence and hoped no one would notice. You tell him to release the fruit of the killing, the victory, the glory, the spoils. Good. But you never once let him release the killing itself. You let him keep the act and surrender only the reward, and then you name the leftover duty. It is the most ingenious attachment ever taught. A man certain he has let go of everything while his hand is still closed around the blade. Releasing the fruit is easy, Krishna, once you have decided the act was holy. I ask the harder thing. Release the act too, if the act requires a corpse.
And some acts that require a corpse are still the lesser grief. That is, the unbearable thing you keep stepping around. When the tyrant marches on the helpless, the man who will not lift the blade has not chosen peace. He has chosen the tyrant. Your refusal of all harm is a gift handed to whoever is willing to be violent first. I do not love the corpse, Gautama. I wept over that field more than you will ever know, but I will not let my weeping become a reason to leave the weak undefended. There is a violence in your gentleness, and only its victims are ever left to name it.
I have heard that argument from every general who ever lived, and it is the truest sounding lie there is. Yes, there is harm in standing still. I have never pretended otherwise. The question is not whether harm waits on both roads. It is whether you let the other road has harm too become your permission to stop counting the harm on yours. The victims of my gentleness can at least name it. The victims of your necessity fill the very field you wept over, and they cannot name it, because you have taught the man who killed them that their deaths were owed. I would rather fail to stop a tyrant and know it than stop him and teach the world that the corpse was a kind of prayer.
Your teachings kept living without you. So tell me what they did to the people who actually believed them.
I have already confessed mine, the kneeling poor, the chains they called devotion. I will not hide from it. But your hands are not clean either, and your record is written too. You taught a fifth of the earth to want nothing, to harm nothing, to sit very still and watch the breath go in and out. And so they sat. They sat while raiders rode in and burned the great libraries to ash. They sat while the temples came down, because to resist was attachment, and to defend was violence, and the self that might have stood and fought had been so carefully dissolved that no one was left to lift a hand. You raised gentle men who could not protect their own children, and you called that gentleness compassion. Between your stillness and my surrender, we emptied the same continent. The only difference is that I have the stomach to say it out loud.
You are right to name it, and I will not dodge it the way the comfortable dodge everything. A teaching meant to free a man from his own grasping was twisted into one that told him to grasp at nothing, not even his own dignity. That is real, and it is a grief to me. But hear the difference in our two failures. Your teaching went wrong by telling men to accept the boot on their neck. Mine went wrong by telling them to feel nothing beneath it. Both are betrayals, but they are betrayals of the teaching, not the teaching itself. A medicine misused is still not the same thing as poison. So the question for this warrior is not which of us was abused by history. It is which of us, rightly heard, leaves him most awake.
Then bring it all the way down to one person. A mother loses her only child. She comes to each of you, destroyed. What do you actually say?
First, I would say nothing at all. I would let her weep until the weeping was finished, because tears too are a prayer, and only a fool interrupts one. And then, very softly, the one you carried was never only the small body you washed and fed and rocked to sleep. You grieve as though he has been wiped out of existence, but you grieve the way a wave grieves, certain it has lost itself forever, when all it has done is sink back into the sea that made it. The actor has only stepped behind the curtain. I cannot hand you the small face again, and I would never insult you by trying. But nothing that was real has been destroyed tonight. It is only gone where you cannot follow it yet.
And I would not say one word about waves or curtains, because tonight she cannot eat any of it. I would give her something to do instead. I would say, go into the town and bring me back a single mustard seed. One seed, nothing more, but it must come from a house where no one has ever died. She will knock on the first door, full of desperate hope, and they will say, we buried the father last spring. The next, we lost a daughter. The next, the grandmother this winter. House after house, the same answer, the whole day long. And somewhere on that road, between two doors, the truth will arrive quietly in her own body with no help from me, that her grief is not a punishment chosen for her alone, It is the one thing every soul she will ever meet is already carrying. Krishna hands her a story to believe. I hand her the whole grieving town to belong to, and a truth she finds with her own 2 feet will hold her up long after a story has worn thin.
The warrior is still standing at the edge of the field. The bow is still in his hand. He has heard every word the 2 of you have said. Tell him, now, what to do.
I will not tell you to lift it, nor will I simply tell you to set it down, for I have never pretended that walking away is clean. I left my own war once, and thrones I might have guided toward mercy were left to crueler men. That cost was real, and I have carried it. So I will not lie to you that refusing is free, but I also will not hand you the oldest roke there is. It will happen anyway. So let it happen through you. That the blood may be spilled regardless is the truest sounding reason ever whispered to a good man to pick up the knife. So here is all I can honestly give you. Do not raise that bow until you have looked long enough to see that no banner makes the dead less dead. That today's victory is tomorrow's grievance. That the man across the field was someone's uncle too. And if, having truly seen all of it, your arm still rises, then let it rise without hatred, without glory, without the lie that the corpse is owed, or that winning will bring you peace. But know this, warrior, the wheel never stops on any field. It stops only inside the one man who finally refuses to keep turning it. That refusal will cost you more than the war. And it is the only victory that does not become the seed of the next.
Listen to him. He is not wrong, and that is exactly what makes him dangerous. The wheel turns. I never once promised you it would stop. I told Arjuna the very same thing. This settles nothing forever, and you must act anyway. But hear the trap folded inside Gautama's mercy. He tells you the wheel stops only inside the man who refuses to turn it. That refusal is the one victory that breeds no new war. And he is right that it costs everything. But while you sit perfecting that refusal, the village is still burning, and the children are still inside it, and the most flawless stillness in the world will not carry a single one of them out. A man can see the whole truth perfectly, sit perfectly still, and call his own paralysis wisdom. And that is the costliest lie of all, because it wears the face of enlightenment while the helpless die waiting for it. So yes, do everything he tells you. Drop the hatred, drop the wanting, drop the dream that winning will bring you peace, and then stand up and play your part with your whole heart, knowing all the while that it is a part. Refusal is not the only victory, Gautama. Sometimes it is only the most graceful way to abandon the people who were counting on you. The children, the old, every soul a tyrant assumes no one will rise to defend. A world is never undone by the violence of the cruel. They are always too few. It is undone by the stillness of the good men who watched and understood and did nothing. So lift the bow, because you are still alive, and the living are meant to act. The dead can sit perfectly still, my friend. You are not dead yet.